Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for another installment of the Research Webinar Series hosted by our team here at the Michigan Virtual Learning Research Institute, or MVLRI. The goal of MVLRI is to expand Michigan's capacity to support new learning models, engage in active research to inform new policies in online and blended learning, and strengthen the state's infrastructures for sharing best practices. MVLRI is a division of MVU, or the Michigan Virtual University, a nonprofit organization whose mission is advancing K-12 education through digital learning, research, innovation, policy, and partnerships. MVU is also the parent company of Michigan Virtual School, a supplemental state-sponsored virtual school, Michigan LearnPort, an online professional development portal for K-12 educators and personnel, and MyBlend, a blended learning initiative providing K-12 schools with resources, products, and services to personalize learning options for their students and improve student achievement. A quick note before we begin today, we did want to make sure that we acknowledge that today's webinar will be recorded publicly. So any chat comments or any discussions will be recorded and shared publicly. So just be sure to be cognizant of that as you are participating in today's webinar. Today's webinar is a presentation in the first of our multi-part series on mentoring online learners, titled Mentors, Making Online Learning Work. This series will consist of multiple webinars spread across the next 6 months or so, so be sure to check our webinars page to find topics and exact dates as they are announced. Today's presentation is the first and will be an introduction to research and best practices around mentoring online learners. I'll now take a moment to introduce today's presenters. Our first presenter is one of our own fellows here at MVLRI, Dr. Jared Borup. Jared is an assistant professor in the Division of Learning Technologies at George Mason University. He earned his PhD in Instructional Psychology and Technology from Brigham Young University in 2013. Previous to earning his PhD, Jared taught history at a junior high school for 6 years. He has taught online and blended courses since 2008. In his current position, he is working to build the Integration of Online Learning in Schools Master's and Certificate Program, which began in its first cohort in fall 2014. He recently served as a fellow for George Mason's Office of Distance Education and led an initiative that prepared faculty for the challenges of online instruction. His current research interests include developing online learning communities and identifying support systems that adolescent learners require to be successful in online environments. We also have Julie Howe, who has been the online learning coordinator at Three Rivers High School for the past 6 years. 2 years ago, they expanded their program with the addition of 3 online classroom coordinators/mentors in the high school. This fall, they began their program at the middle school with 2 online classroom mentors. The program has averaged a 95% student success rate over the last 6 years and was recognized during the 2012-2013 school year for their high level of student performance. The 2013-2014 online students had a 97% success rate due to the caring support of well-trained mentors. Three Rivers Mentors' goal is to provide innovative educational opportunities to meet the students' diverse learning styles. Their mission is to provide personalized and engaging learning experience for all students. So you can imagine why we've asked Julie here to talk with us about their success. Lastly, we have our own Rebecca Stimson. Rebecca joined MVU as proposal and content writer for the Michigan Virtual Learning Research Institute in 2012. Rebecca has English education credentials and a BA in Urban Development-Urban Education from Michigan State University. In addition, she earned an MA in Educational Policy Studies from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She taught personalized development reading and writing at Lansing Community College for 6 years and has over 25 years of experience writing and editing for a variety of audience. With that, we want to welcome our presenters, and I will hand it off to Jared to start us off.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you for everyone that made it today. I know that for many of you, this is your first week back after the break, and it can be pretty hectic, so thanks for coming. I want to start with a little visual quiz here. Go ahead and type in the chat box if you know who the player is with the ball here. Okay, it looks like we had some, that was close. Yes, it's Secretary Arnie Duncan. This is the not NCAA. This was the NBA All-Star Weekend last year, so you see the NOLA 14. But the real question is why is he wearing number 80? Does anyone know? Okay, good. So Scott's right that the on-time graduation rate for a long time has kind of hovered around 70 to 75%, and it recently just increased to 80%. So this is notable because we haven't really seen increases for quite a while. Why there's been increases is kind of up for debate, but it is important to note. If you want to read more about this, he actually wrote an editorial that was interesting called "Why Wear 80?" Because typically basketball players don't wear number 80. And in there, he acknowledges that the graduation rate in some areas of our country is much lower than 80%. And although that's the average, we still have a lot of work to do. One area where we have a lot of work to do is actually with online learning. It's difficult to know exactly what the pass rate is in online courses, but we believe that it's lower, and some have estimated that it's about 10 or 20% lower. So the question is, why do online students drop out? And there hasn't been enough research in this area, but we need to know that younger students working in an environment that is quite autonomous, has a lot of flexibility, can be challenging for them because they don't have the self-regulation metacognitive skills that they need. One research study found 5 reasons why students drop out. And these were rural students taking an online course. One was scheduling and time constraints. Again, with all the flexibility, that proved very challenging for them. They weren't exactly prepared for the rigor of online learning. A lot of times these students feel like online learning is an easy option, and when they get in there, they find that it's not and can actually be more difficult, and they lack the motivation to really persevere. Some students have technological problems. Orienting an online course can be challenging. In a face-to-face environment, you don't need to show them how to use a desk and a pen and paper. But in an online environment, many of these students, we need to show them how to log into their course and how to access material and use the resources that are available. Also, lack of teacher immediacy. Although teachers can respond relatively quickly, a lot of times even a few hours might be a long time for them to wait for a response. And so that lack of teacher immediacy can be difficult. And also parental influences. Sometimes parents don't fully support students in their decision to take online courses, and when things become difficult for them, they recommend that they drop and take more traditional courses. So the solution to this is quite complex, but we believe that mentors or on-site mentors will play a critical role in improving pass rates because they work with students individually and in their brick and mortar school, and because of that, they can really provide students with support that others can't. So if we look at a face-to-face course, like Justin mentioned, I taught face-to-face, and I designed the course, I taught the course, and then I also mentored and facilitated students through that course. In an online environment, those roles can be divided into different positions. So you might have a designer that designs the course, a teacher that teaches the course, and then an on-site or an online mentor to kind of facilitate students through that course. So we're not necessarily going to talk about the designer in this presentation, but we just want to talk about the team here. We have a teacher, mentor, student, and parent, and I just wanted to briefly talk about how each of these individuals are unique and important. The first is the teacher. The teacher is obviously the content expert and also the pedagogical expert. Because of that, they know how to assess students and provide feedback and tutor and things like that. The mentor, they don't have the same content expertise, but they need to understand the online course, the procedures of the course, the timeline, and also they need to understand what it's like to be an online student and some of the challenges that students face when they're new to online learning. The student, although there's a lot of support around the student, it's ultimately their responsibility to learn and to put forth the effort to be successful. We also have the parent. The parent is unique because they've obviously developed a close relationship with the student. They understand the student needs, their preferences, and a lot of times it's the parent that encourages students to take an online course, and because of that, they really play a critical role in having them succeed in that course. So if we look at how the team members are structured, we're going to look at how online learning looks to students and mentors and teachers and parents as well. So here we have our student. The dotted line means that they have a mediated communication or online communication. So typically students don't communicate with their teacher face-to-face, but they can talk online with them. They also need to understand that they have support at school with their mentor, where they can interact with their mentor face-to-face, and also support at home from their parent. From an online teacher's perspective, this can be quite complex because what they'll have, depending on the size of the course, they'll have students in several different brick-and-mortar schools, and in those brick-and-mortar schools, they'll have different on-site mentors that they're working with as well, and on top of that, with parents. So it can be quite complex, and you can see how important it is for a mentor from an online teacher's perspective to make sure everything is going well. From a parent perspective, yes, parents can contact the online teacher, but typically what will happen is that they'll develop a relationship with the mentor, and the mentor will act as a communication link between parents and teacher. And then they can also work with students from a parent's perspective as well. They can go online and check student progress and things like that. From a mentor's perspective, they work with teachers online. They also work with typically multiple students at their brick-and-mortar school, and then they also work with parents online. So this looks fairly straightforward, but you have to understand that many mentors are working with multiple students, and in some cases, upwards to full-time mentors can work with 100 or more students, and Julie will talk about that later on. So it can be quite complex because the more students they have, the higher the likelihood that they're in separate courses, and because they're in separate courses, mentors need to work with multiple online instructors. So when we look at this, we really understand that the mentor is critical for all of this. When we look at everyone's perspective, the mentor is right in the center, and they play a critical role. So what are mentoring responsibilities? So we did two things to identify these responsibilities. We looked at the literature, and Rebecca also interviewed several mentors in Michigan to identify what mentors really are responsible for doing. The first one is that mentors are critical in helping students understand if online learning is good for them. So they can meet with potential students and assess them. They can use readiness surveys with them and work with parents as well to understand student personality and if this is a good fit for them or not. And then once they become online students, they need to make sure that they're oriented to the learning management system and the course and how to find things, how to contact the instructor and things like that. So they're really critical in orienting and guiding students through the initial phases of online learning. After that initial phase, mentors play a critical role as a coach. So if you think of a basketball coach or an athletic coach, they're really important for motivating students, but not only that, they need to go beyond motivation to make sure that students are prepared. So for instance, they need to help students develop the study skills, because oftentimes the learning skills that they need to be successful face-to-face aren't the same learning skills that they need to be successful online. And so mentors need to coach them in those. Coach them to understand how attendance is different. Although they may not have a specific time during the day when they need to work every single day, but they need to understand that they need to attend virtually as well. Another responsibility of mentors is that they need to act as a friend or a motivator. One researcher said that they act as a problem solver and mentor and friend. One mentor that we interviewed said that this is really critical. It's key that they develop this relationship with students, because students have to trust you and like you if they're going to perform. Another mentor, I really like this quote because it highlights that mentors can bring the human aspect into the online world. Oftentimes in an online learning environment, although they may have a high level of interaction with their teacher, it tends to be text-based, and because of that it can feel quite impersonal. And so being there face-to-face with students can be critical because they bring that human aspect to the online environment. Also, mentors need to really track student progress closely, so they can go into the learning management system and they can see what assignments they've turned in. They can also look at the analytic data and see how often they're logging in, what resources they're accessing, which can be very helpful for mentors to diagnose issues that students are having or kind of their engagement levels in the course. They also need to meet regularly with students and just ask them, you know, how are things going, what problems are you having, and track their progress that way. Mentors also act as communication links. So as we saw in those different perspectives, students can contact their instructor directly, but at the same time they may not know how to do that. And so mentors can model that, and they can encourage students to contact their teacher. One thing that we found in the research is that oftentimes students will ask mentors for content help or for tutoring help. Well, if we have to remember that the mentor isn't a content expert, so they need to facilitate the communication between the student and the online teacher in those cases, and also to facilitate communication between parents and the online instructor when necessary. So oftentimes, depending on the model in the school, some mentors will have a classroom and students will come in and work during the day. And when that's the case, mentors also have to know how to manage classroom behavior and make sure that everything is working smoothly, that students are on task, similar to how classroom teachers need to manage behavior. Again, that doesn't take content expertise, but it does take some pedagogical expertise. So one question that everyone has is, do mentors impact student performance? And that's a great question. Unfortunately, there isn't very much research that has explored that. We really need to look at that further. But the existing research, or the emerging research, is promising, and it does indicate that mentors can have quite a large impact on student performance. So for instance, in one quite large study, they looked at this and they found that students were twice as likely to pass a course when they were given an assigned class period to work. So basically, if students have a mentor and an assigned time to work with that mentor, they're much more likely to pass a course. And in this study, they were twice as likely to pass a course. The impact that mentors can have on students also depends on student characteristics. There's some emerging research that has shown that at-risk students are especially susceptible to mentors and really need that support, because oftentimes they don't have the same level of parental involvement at home. So some emerging research has found that mentors can be especially important for this group of students. Probably one of the most interesting things for me, and one of the most important takeaways from the literature, is that the impact that mentors can have on students really depends on the training or the professional development that they receive. Oftentimes what will happen is that an administrator, they might be required to provide an on-site mentor, so they'll talk to someone in the hall and say, hey, you're now the mentor to Johnny and Sally. But they never actually give them the professional development that they need. And research has found that students do better if they have a mentor that's received professional development than students that have a mentor that hasn't received that professional development. And I think this quote really summarizes it best, that facilitators are made, not born. And so if we just ask them to be mentors without providing them with professional development, we're just assuming that it comes naturally, and it does not come naturally. We want mentors to be good on purpose, and so we need to provide them with the skills for that. And I'll turn the time over to Rebecca to talk a little bit more about that as well.
Thank you, Jared, and welcome everyone. I wanted to talk just a little bit about the mentor case studies that Jared referred to earlier. These are the result of interviews with 14 mentors at 10 schools, and will describe the various ways online students receive mentoring support. What I found in those interviews were that some schools had full-time mentors with dedicated labs. One had a full-time teacher assigned to mentor a couple of periods a day, but moved in between different classrooms or labs. One had a teacher acting as a mentor in addition to a full-time teaching load. He tracks students down at lunch and before and after school, but for the most part does not actually check in with students on a daily basis. One of the rural school administrators acted as the mentor of record with part-time parapros providing the face-to-face mentoring. And two of the programs had counselors who were mentors of record with counseling center staff or parapros as daily contact points for students. You can see by this, or you can understand by this description, that the programs represent really broad means of defining school mentors. The case studies will actually illustrate more specifics about what they have in common and what's different, and will be available on the MVLRI website when they're complete. Julie Howe, I just want to say, to kind of give you a brief and further introduction to her, represents the full-time mentor model, but she'll be talking more about her mentor role and responsibilities after I work through the next slide or two. This slide shows you what the makeup of the programs that I interviewed was. You can see the geographic location of the schools, the number of students enrolled, the number of mentors they have, the years they've mentored, and the average number of students mentored is quite varied. And also, we wanted something very representative, or as representative as we could be. So you can see it's from rural to suburban to urban areas as well. For those of you who are interested in the research protocol, I actually began by asking our customer service and sales folks to recommend mentors they knew who they thought would be willing to participate, and then set up interviews with folks. For the most part, I talked to people at least an hour. Often I had to send them a few questions that we didn't get to, and they sent me email responses, and sometimes I just scheduled follow-up phone calls because, of course, that's what I prefer, so that we can build on the comments that you get during a conversation. The interview questions covered the who, which is really a biography of the mentor, some of the things that Jared mentioned in terms of what we look for in really successful mentors, their educational background and work experience, how they became a mentor. Then, of course, I get into the nitty-gritty of what their particular mentoring practice looks like, the what, the how, and the when. For example, how many students they mentor, what their typical routine is, how they orient students, how students are scheduled, how they communicate with the student and the student's team, which could be the parent or guardian, the teacher, administrator, counselor, and sometimes a coach. And again, Julie will cover that broad base as well. At the end of the interview, I asked for suggestions, their advice to mentors, students, teachers, and administrators. For those of you who have seen the mentor guide, and I suspect that's quite a few of you, a lot of what I gathered from those interviews is in our mentor guide. So the end products of these interviews are the profiles themselves, which are, as I said, currently being finalized and will be published on our website. The mentor orientation and training module that Jared is producing is a combination of his research material that he's described, as well as material from the mentor guide. And as I said, a large portion of what is in the mentor guide is actual material drawn from the mentors themselves. We wanted to tell the story from the position of, or present the story from the position of the people who do the work, and share what they find as best practices. If you have not seen that mentor guide, it's available for download from our website, and we'll post a link to it in the chat box. it's a resource that is just rich with, I can't say enough about the contribution of the mentors that I interviewed. It's just rich with their wisdom and experience, and it's important to highlight their contribution because it's work very important to student success, and they do it every day. So now to speak more about the real life of mentors and their roles and responsibilities is online learning coordinator and mentor teacher and my go-to person for all things mentor, Julie Howe.
Hi, and good afternoon to everyone. Thanks. That was a very nice introduction. My section of the presentation is sharing our experiences from our online learning program. We're going to cover best practices, and we'll go through each one of those and see if you have any questions. I would have to say for our mentors, one of the most important things is that they can establish a relationship. I know that was mentioned earlier while Jared was presenting. We see it as there's a big difference between mentoring versus monitoring. It's not just being in the room taking attendance. It's nurturing, encouraging, coaching, finding out what actually motivates the student. We have found in our experience that makes a tremendous difference, making that relationship. Kids have good days and bad days, and finding out maybe if there's something particular in their life, maybe something we can help, maybe something we don't have any control over, but it can at least understand where they're coming from. And keeping like a welcoming and well-managed classroom environment certainly adds to student success. It also makes a difference when you know your students to get the right course, to make sure there's a good fit, to find out what motivates them and find out their readiness for learning online. Communication for us is essential. We go through this every week, every day, and this includes the online instructors, parents, guidance counselors, administration, communicating with the students. Even yesterday, I was communicating with an online instructor and being the liaison to help resolve some communication issues. There are two sides to every story, and I would say that part of my responsibility is also as a mediator and to help students with their online communication. We make this a critical part of our first week online orientation. In this day and age of texting, we find that netiquette is lacking, and we put a great deal of focus on communicating online and make sure that students know how to effectively communicate with their instructors and that they follow common courtesies and manners. We also make sure that we inform students and parents of pacing guides and grading policies. As our semester winds down, we're finding this is a critical issue because we have so many different students and so many different courses. It's impossible to list each assignment in our student information system, so we have an overall progress grade, which is based on the percentage of the work attempted versus the work that should be accomplished by that date or time or the week. And getting near the end, now parents are like, what happened? Johnny's grade was an 82 and it should be a 95. It's like, yes, once he gets his final work in, it will probably be a 95. But I think that's one of our big concerns is making sure that parents and students know where they need to be at any given time. And I think that contributes, the pacing guides definitely contribute to our student success and communicating and tracking their success. Looks like I'm having a little problem. For our best practice, we use multi-tiered systems of support. We use explore, plan, aims, map, ACT, Power School to get the best fit of courses. I think that's first and foremost. And that's done with the collaboration between mentors, counselors, and our fantastic principal. I feel like we have a great deal of support. Some students are not online learners, and they can't just be placed in there because there's not someone somewhere else to put them. That definitely does not add to success. We have weekly grading conferences, and grades are updated, and we check logins to make sure students are on track and doing what they're supposed to be doing. We use evidence-based practices from experienced mentor teachers, and we constantly take advice from online providers. One of the keys to our success is our PLC, our professional learning community, that's held once a week on Monday. We have an early release day, and all our mentors come together and we discuss our at-risk students, any concerns within the course, any technology issues, grading issues, and anything that we have upcoming or that we need to work on as far as policies with online learning. I would say we definitely have collaborative problem solving. Our group is very diverse. We have 3 females and 2 males. Moms, one dad, one mentor, doesn't have any children. And we have a wide variety of ages, and that really suits our students, because if there's a personality issue, we can move the student to another mentor, and that seems to help a great deal. I think one of the keys to our success is our mentor training. When I first started this in 2012, the first thing I did was I gave each one of my mentors a key on a little ribbon, and I said, you are the key to your students. You are the key to their success. And I would say we had initially about a 20 to 25-hour program. Part of that time was used to enroll students. I would say the actual training was more between 16 and 20 hours. We reviewed organizational skills, data collection. We happened to use Power School, so it was making sure that everyone was aware of how to use Power School. Technology skills, using Google Docs, finding outside support. So if a mentor wasn't comfortable, we had resources and time to help them with that. Confidentiality is an issue, and making sure that the mentors understood the legal aspect of their professional responsibilities. Academic integrity, using Land School, being able to record, find and record keystrokes, and where students spend on the internet. Communication as far as expectations. We have a shared document of classroom and lab expectations, course policy, and they're consistent from one lab to another, and from the high school to the middle school. We want consistency. We want to make sure all school policies are enforced, and pacing guides are consistent. We don't we have excellent content providers, and we do not, we make it a goal or a priority not to edit content in any way. We make sure all content is kept and followed in its integrity in the course. My ideal mentor, is someone who's had classroom experience, particularly at the grade level. I'll give you an example. One of our very successful high school mentors was a substitute teacher. She has a background in education, but she didn't teach. She was a longtime sub, and that made a huge difference. She had classroom management skills, Our middle school mentor has subbed for about 4 or 5 years in the middle school. She knew the children, and she had excellent classroom management skills. Communication skills, even as I'm interviewing and going through the application process with the mentor, I'm constantly observing for communication skills. And this is particularly important when communicating with parents, students, and with online instructors. You can have a lot of things that get lost in translation and communication. We certainly don't want anything to happen there. We have found that our mentors who had a personal experience with online learning were definitely much more able to relate to the student and their situation because of the separation of time and space from the online instructor. Sometimes the online learner can become frustrated, and being able to relate to that on a first-hand experience makes a big difference for our students. That we can say, okay, here, let's take another look at this, and let's sit back and let's try another approach. Or we understand. In some cases, I've been able to Skype or FaceTime with the online instructor, so the student can actually put a face and name and see there really is another person on the other side, and that's made a big difference too. Strong technology skills are a great way to get off and running. I think it's very difficult because we have to troubleshoot very quickly, that if a mentor doesn't have that skill set, it takes us a while to play catch up. And fortunately, we haven't been in that situation. It's also nice for the mentor to have a degree. I wouldn't say that they would have to be a content specialist. In fact, our experience with having content specialists sometimes has been rather complicated. We have one of our mentors is elementary, the other one is business, another one is art and design, and somehow we managed to all pull it together and do very well. I would say our experience this year is that we've learned firsthand, because we had to hire a new mentor 2 days before school started. The mentor having the time to do the mentor training and the PD before the school year starts really adds to success. Thank goodness our new mentor is very flexible and has been able to come on board, and with our PLCs has been able to come up to speed rather quickly. But it was a definite disadvantage because he didn't have the time and the opportunity to work with the other experienced mentors to help him. And I think that's the end of my part for all of you.
Thanks, Julie. This is Becky again. I'll just sort of briefly go over the mentor resources that are listed here. Justin did put a link in the chat room for the mentor guide. That's the first one listed here. And then the mentor orientation model is very close to being completed. And I'll just say now that Julie and the core of mentors that she has that she was describing graciously agreed to be in a Google Hangout with us, and we have some video captured from that session that will be added to the mentor orientation module. So those mentors, either brand new or those who just want to polish their skills, do a little professional development, will have the benefit of hearing from both seasoned and new mentors about best practices. So again, a public thank you, Julie, to you and your team for doing that. And then the last one listed there is the Parent Guide to Online Learning, which has been updated since it was published in 2013 or the very beginning of 2014. And then you'll see also the 21F Toolkit resources. This is quite specific to Michigan. The other two documents, while they do have reference to Michigan law and regulations about mentors in Michigan public schools, the 21F Toolkit resources are still something that you can modify for your own purposes. And then there's a website from Jared. That's learntech.gmu.edu. And then Mrs. Howe's class is a page that Julie has up that gives you perspective on what her mentors are working with. Julie, do you see the question there from Joe? What, if anything, does your mentoring team do to help teachers in your school get on board with online learning? And what are some of the challenges you have faced with colleague acceptance?
I think that an important part for us has been our mentors have always been considered part of the staff, that we participate in all the professional development and all the professional responsibilities. So we're considered, I think a lot of teachers look at us as equals. We have had a couple instances where we've had some challenges, and funny enough, it's been a matter of communication or misunderstanding. One science teacher felt rather put off by the fact that students were taking oceanography. Well, as it turned out, we only had 10 oceanography students, and we have a guideline at our school that if we don't have at least 20 students, we can't run a class. So when that was made evident that we follow particular numbers and guidelines, the teacher was very receptive and then understood. I said our goal has not been to be in competition with our teachers, but it's been to offer our students learning opportunities that would not otherwise be available. Does that help?
That was a great answer. Thank you, Julie. I think it's definitely important to hear some of your insight, especially given the success rate you've managed to actually put together there at Three Rivers. I believe Becky is leaving it here to ask whether or not we have any questions or comments. So if there are any other questions or comments, thank you, Joe. Looks like we have another from Joe. Julie, do you have any feedback from students who have gone off to college?
Oh, yes. And it's all been incredibly positive. They've come back and they've thanked us that they are so excited and so happy that they had the experience with the online learning format, the independent learning style, and the fact that they were able to learn the LMS. They had the experience in Blackboard. A recent one came back, a recent graduate came back after his first semester in college and said, guess what, Mrs. Howe, they use Blackboard, and I had to help everybody else in the class. I knew just what to do. Thank goodness. I took, I think he took, it was human space exploration, and then he also took astronomy. And he's like, I knew exactly what to do. And that just made my day. And he wasn't the only one. We've had several students come back who said, you know what? My college course is basically online. I go to the professor for discussion, or I have to email. And thank you so much for teaching me how to write a proper email. It's been a real positive experience. We haven't had any negative feedback. In fact, the kids are very thankful they had that opportunity. It was very helpful for them as they went on to their college courses, and especially, you know, all universities use some type of LMS.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for demonstrating just how important it is to get that online experience for when they do go off to that higher learning environment, where they're more than likely going to be taking an online course, and without the support of the mentor that they got pretty used to having around there at Three Rivers, I'm sure. We'll leave it open for a couple more minutes if there are any other questions or comments for our presenters. I see a few people are typing, so I'll leave it up just for a couple more seconds here. Go ahead and throw up our contact information for our presenters. You can reach Dr. Jared Borup at jborup@gmu.edu, Julie Howe at jhowe@trschools.org, and Rebecca Stimson at rstimson@mivu.org. Becky, did you want to share anything more about how folks can get in contact with you or what they might want to contact you about?
Oops, yes, sorry. I was just in the midst of trying to get our little invitation to any potential guest bloggers out there to contribute to our guest blogging program. Once you get into the mentor guide, you'll find that there's an email inside the mentor guide pages for anything related to the guide. And certainly you have our personal emails here. I think at some point in the slide presentation you have the MVLRI team email, so we try to make it possible for you to get in touch with us in any way that is easiest for you. I'm not sure that we have phone numbers listed here, but you certainly can go to our to the MVU homepage, and our phone numbers are there. One thing we didn't talk about was our online learning orientation tool, which is very much one of the resources that we see being very important to mentors. Again, during the discussions that I had with mentors for the interviews, there was a lot of conversation about helping students get prepared, helping students for online courses, helping orient them to the difference between online and traditional learning. And OLAT, the online learning orientation tool, is being updated for the 21st century, and it's something that MVU developed a long time ago, and it's being updated, and we are hoping to launch that toward the end of the month, and that in fact is the subject of our next webinar. Justin, were you going to say something about that?
No, I did just post the I posted the URL for the beta version of OLAT. So for those of you who are curious about the tool itself, take a look, click on that URL. Remember that it is in beta, so there are a ton of revisions being made right now, and it will look drastically different once it's launched in conjunction with the launch of the spring semester later this month. But if you'd like to go in and just kind of get a feel for what it is and its purpose, please do so. And again, always we're welcome to feedback. So if you have feedback on the online learning and orientation tool, how you might think it might be very integral in building your own mentoring program within your school, please let us know. I will go ahead and wrap it up with that. Thank you again to our presenters so much for coming and sharing with us today. We did want to give a reminder of our next webinar, upcoming webinar, next Thursday, January 15th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And we'll be joined by John Payne from RAND Education, who will be sharing some of his interim research findings on schools pursuing personalized learning. We'd also encourage you to check out the URL that Catherine posted, which is our webinars page, to find out more about the specific dates and times for this specific webinar series on mentoring. Lastly, oh, sorry, go ahead, Becky.
I just wanted to say that we are planning, stay tuned to the website, because we are planning the launch of the mentor orientation and training module that we've been talking about, and Jared and Julie will be on hand to talk about that, and we'll be introducing that to you the first week of February sometime. Stay tuned. That's it, Justin.
Great, thanks. Thank you. Yep, so be sure to follow us if you'd like to be added to our listserv. Shoot us an email, mvlri@mivu.org. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We will be sharing with all of our attendees today the link to our recording of this webinar, which will be posted on our YouTube page, and our YouTube handle is simply MVLRI. So if you have any questions, like to get in touch with us, please do so. We hope everyone enjoys the rest of their week. Take care.